the most important aspects of any aquarium is maintaining good water quality. And in order to maintain good water quality, you need to know what good water quality is and what tests you need to do to make sure that your water quality is maintained high. Now, one thing, the bigger the aquarium, generally the easier it is to maintain good water quality, because you'll experience less fluctuations in a large aquarium, and instances will have a smaller impact within a larger volume of water as opposed to a smaller volume of water where changes will occur more rapidly. A logbook is one of the best keys as far as maintaining good water quality. The logbook really allows you to keep a check of yourself, because you might swear in your heart that you tested your pH last week, but it actually wasn't last week or the week before. Because I really believe if you don't write down when you're testing things, you really don't know when it is that you've done it. Particularly with reef tanks, where you're aiming for low nutrients, you really want to look at the natural environment these animals are from. And why is it that on a natural coral reef, you'll see basically no algae with a very rich, diverse range of corals? On the other hand, not too far away, there's a river which is full of algae, which has got basically no corals at all. You need to try and imitate that particular environment. So if you're providing an environment which is high in nutrients, high nitrates, high phosphates, then you'll see your corals start to deteriorate, and you'll find your algae will actually thrive, which you could say is imitating a river. So if you are able to imitate the natural environment and provide an environment which is very low in nutrients and very high in calcium, pH and hardness, then you'll find your corals will absolutely thrive and your algae will actually struggle. No matter what sort of aquarium you've got, being aware of pH is really quite important. Now, with a reef aquarium, you'll try and maintain the pH at about 8.4, because in general, the higher the pH of your aquarium, the less algae you tend to get in the aquarium, and the more stable the aquarium tends to be. On the other hand, with a fish-only aquarium, where you tend to have a lot more fish in the aquarium and there's more risk of ammonia, you tend to keep your pH a little bit lower, more like 8.1 or even 8, because as far as ammonia is concerned, which is first-degree fish waste, the higher the pH, the more toxic the ammonia. So therefore, if you're adding new fish, or if your aquarium is fairly unstable, it's probably better to maintain the pH a little bit lower, because the toxicity of the ammonia will actually be lower. There's various commercially available buffers that will increase the pH of your aquarium. So slowly add the buffers until you get the pH at your desired level. With most of the powders, it's better that you pre-mix them in aged tap water before you pour them into the aquarium to raise your pH slowly. Carbonate hardness basically helps to stabilize your pH. And in general, the higher your pH, the less algae you tend to get in the aquarium, and the more it tends to benefit the corals. So carbonate hardness is less of an issue in a fish-only aquarium, but it does help to reduce algae. But carbonate hardness is very important in a reef aquarium. In a reef aquarium, you're trying to keep the carbonate hardness very high, about 200 or 300 parts per million. Carbonate hardness is raised by buffers in the same fashion that the pH is raised. When the fish produce waste, they basically produce waste in the form of ammonia. So when proteins and amino acids have broken down, hopefully via the digestive system of the fish, what you will produce is ammonia. And ammonia is either in the form of a gas, ammonia gas, or ammonium. And the higher the pH, the more toxic the ammonia, because the more parts the ammonia will be towards the ammonia gas. So the ammonia gas, NH3, and the ammonium, NH4, are both divisions within the ammonia. So the higher your pH, the more toxic the ammonia, the lower the pH, the less toxic the ammonia. Ammonia is very toxic to fish, and you really need to make it zero under all circumstances. The only time you're really going to experience ammonia in your aquarium is if you overfeed your fish, or if there's too much waste being produced in your aquarium for what your filter can handle, because your filter is going to be growing bacteria, and the bacteria is going to be breaking this ammonia down into nitrite. So a little bacteria grows in your filter, on your rocks, on the surface of your aquarium walls, and break the ammonia into nitrite. So nitrite is basically the second phase of this cycle. Fish producing waste, the waste being ammonia, the bacteria breaking the ammonia down into nitrite. Nitrite, second degree waste, is also broken down by bacteria into nitrate. Nitrite is reduced in a similar fashion to ammonia. So there are chemicals commercially available to get rid of nitrite, sponges and other chemicals. Water changes will also help to get rid of nitrite, and as far as nitrite and ammonia are concerned, time and the formation of bacteria will get rid of nitrite. Nitrate mainly causes algae, and with time will lower the immune system of your fish and corals, but is nowhere near as toxic as the ammonia or nitrite. The main way that you get rid of nitrate is various sponges that will suck the nitrate out of the water, or simply doing water changes, particularly using gravel siphons where you can pull the detritus out of the bottom of your aquarium and make sure your filters are well and truly maintained properly and nice and clean. Calcium and phosphate pretty much work hand in hand. In fish-only aquariums where you don't have coral, you don't really tend to focus on either calcium or phosphate, because the only negative effects of incorrect phosphate or calcium levels as far as your fish are concerned is probably a little bit more algae in your aquarium. On the other hand, with a reef aquarium, it is very important that you check phosphate, because the phosphate is going to affect the corals. So, high calcium, low phosphate, the corals love it. High phosphate, low calcium, the algae loves it. Water changes will help to reduce phosphate levels, and there's a lot of chemicals and sponges on the market which will help to suck phosphate out of the water. And one of the things that helps to mask phosphate or reduce the effects of phosphate is calcium. As far as calcium is concerned, trying to maintain it at 450 or higher is very important, and there's plenty of commercially available calciums which will help you to raise the calcium level. It's better to raise the calcium level slowly as opposed to overdose any chemicals that you do add. So if it's a liquid, you can add them slowly and progressively into the aquarium, or if it's a powder, it's best to mix the calcium with fresh water that you've added water ager to before you add the calcium to the aquarium. People often overlook the importance of salt, because salt's one of those things that will just change over time. Because as the fresh water evaporates out of your aquarium, the salt level of your aquarium will slowly increase. And it's really important before you go to the aquarium to get new fish that you check your salt level, because you don't want it to have creeped up over time. For a fish-only aquarium, we do tend to keep the salt level lower than a reef aquarium, because as far as the fish are concerned, the lower the salt level, the less problems they tend to have with pathogens, because the less osmotic stress the salt causes to their body. But as far as the reef aquarium is concerned, we try to have the aquarium with a higher salt level. The corals prefer the salt level to be 1.024 or 1.025, whereas we can actually achieve higher success with the fish, particularly if they are having problems with diseases such as white spot, with a much lower salt level, even down to 1.018. So compromising the salt level and keeping it in the middle is important for a reef aquarium, but having a slightly lower salt level is very common for a fish-only aquarium. The other thing to bear in mind is that most of your retail stores which you're buying the fish from tend to have a lower salt level too. So acclimatizing your fish slowly is very important. In a stable aquarium where you're not likely to be putting in fish anytime soon, you're probably going to keep the salt level more like 1.023, 1.024, or even slightly higher, because the corals prefer a higher salt, the fish prefer a lower salt. So salt level is very easy. If your salt level is too low, we just add some salt. Try not to tip a bag of salt straight into the aquarium. You pre-mix the salt in a bucket, then tip it into the aquarium once it's already dissolved. If your salt level is too high, you drain a little bit of water out of the aquarium and add fresh water, which of course has had water ager, into the aquarium, and that will make your salt level go down. So the corals do also require vitamins and trace elements. There's plenty of commercially available vitamin and trace element supplements that you do need to add regularly to your aquarium. And also be aware with your protein skimmer, when you put these vitamin and trace element supplements into the aquarium, to take the cap off the skimmer for at least a couple of days so they're not sucked out by the skimmer, and make sure there's no carbon or any other medium which will suck these trace elements out of the water. The trace elements tend to be added once or twice a week, and make sure that you're adding iodide, because the iodide will help to suppress bacterial infections with your corals and also your fish. So a lot of these elements precipitate regularly out of the aquarium, and you need to add them often to keep them in solution. And follow the instructions on the pack, because a lot of them also need to be kept in the fridge. So watch the expiry date and keep a lot of these products in your fridge. So you're testing your water, you're making sure that your water quality is correct in your logbook using the various test kits. Then you've got various chemicals which are going to compensate for the answers and correct the answers of these test kits.